Welcome to another edition of Bible Time. Today we come to the end of our study of the book of Nehemiah. What a great study this has been to see under the leadership of Nehemiah the reconstruction of the walls of Jerusalem, critical to the populating and the activity of that city, the safety of that city, but more importantly, the reformation of the lives of the people as we've seen revival break out amongst the people. And we come today in chapter 12 and 13. Chapter 12 talks about the dedication of those walls, the dedication service that they had at the completion of the walls. And the chapter starts off like a lot of chapters here with long lists of names of Levites and priests. And I just want to point out a couple of things. I mean, this is a part that a lot of people find difficult because it's a long list of names that you can't pronounce and who are these people and all that. Well, it tells us what some of them do. Like, for example, it talks about those who are the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers there near the end, around verse 20, 25 or so, it talks about gatekeepers. Some of the Levites were the gatekeepers. That doesn't sound real thrilling, does it? I mean, they're not in the spotlight, they're not up in front. But I just want to remind you of the words of Psalm 84:10 that says that where the writer says he'd rather be a gatekeeper in the house of the Lord than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. And even one day in the courts of God is better than 10,000 elsewhere. I mean, they saw this as an incredible privilege to be gatekeepers at the house of God. That was better than to live in luxury somewhere else. And that's an attitude that we can model. We can see whatever we do at church, however big or small it might seem to be, the fact that we get to serve in God's family, His church, it should be seen as an incredible privilege, and we should be falling over each other for the chance to get to do whatever we can do. Also, you'll notice in verse 27, it talks about the dedication. Dedication, the Aramaic word for dedication is Hanukkah. Now, that might sound familiar to you. It doesn't come, the celebration of Hanukkah amongst our Jewish friends doesn't come from this account. It's much later in 165 after the people recover and rededicate the temple. They recover it from the Seleucids who had taken over. They recover it and they rededicate the temple, and that's where Hanukkah comes from. It's a dedication. That's what the word means. And you'll notice there that at this dedication they have two great choirs, and they're singing praises to the Lord. And there's great rejoicing, as it says there in verse 43. It says, and they offered great sacrifices that day and rejoiced, for God had made them rejoice with great joy. The women and the children also rejoiced, and the joy of Jerusalem was heard far away. I mean, that's something for us to model as well. To think that we could serve for God amongst His people, and the rejoicing that we can have in Him, it should be so loud that we wake up San Antonio when we're worshiping at the church. Those are things for us to model. And this is written to encourage the people of Israel about what God had done and the joy that He had brought them. Well, that's an encouragement for us as well. But the point that we want to make here from Nehemiah is that rebuilding the people is more important than rebuilding the walls. Nehemiah knew what the ultimate target was, and it's the lives of the people. And the greater need that the people have, greater need than that of the wall, is for them to be right with God. And so we saw that taking place. We saw the Reformation happen. We saw the commitments made and all of that. But then when you get to chapter 13, it's kind of a sad ending, isn't it? Because Nehemiah went away for a while and went back to Babylon for a while. When he came back, he found that the people had broken all the commitments that they had made. Commitments regarding marriage, commitments regarding the Sabbath, commitments regarding the care of the temple. I mean, there was a guy living in one of the storehouses at the temple. That's how bad it had become. And Nehemiah, this whole process here of dealing with these issues begins with the reading of the law of Moses at the beginning of chapter 13. And then they begin identifying all these issues, and they happen to be the very things that the people had committed to do. And Nehemiah responds decisively. I mean, you can read the chapter, you can see what he does. Nehemiah is not happy. And Nehemiah takes this serious. And Nehemiah, one by one, deals with each of the issues. That's real leadership there. It's one thing to complain about the people aren't doing what they should be doing. It's another thing to take decisive action. That's what Nehemiah does. And that's not popular. That's not considered loving in our day. But is it loving to let people go on in their sin? And Nehemiah responded decisively. In our day, Nehemiah would be run out of the church. But we need to follow his example. We need to be committed to God. We need to think about what God thinks, not just what the people think. And Nehemiah provides a good example. And 3 times here, he says to the Lord, after each act of correction, he says, remember me. He tells the Lord to remember him. And that's not, he's not saying, hey, Lord, would you write this down so you don't forget what I did? No, in the biblical terms, to remember means to act on your behalf. He's asking God to bless him in response to his obedience to God, even in doing the hard things. And the reality is God might be the only one remembering him, but God might be the only one honoring him. But for Nehemiah, that was good enough. So we spend a lot of time taking care of the external in our life. And Nehemiah did that. He took care of the external. He rebuilt the wall. That's important. But more important was a right relationship with God. And that's the message that we need to take away from this book. The reconstruction, the reformation of the people is telling us that what really matters is that we walk right with the Lord and we keep his word. We study his word. We learn his word. We obey his word. He is the Lord. And he can bring great joy, great rejoicing to us as we follow after him. So let's be committed to doing that and doing it wholeheartedly for the sake of the Lord, that we might honor him in all that we do. And we'll see you tomorrow as we start a new book on Bible Time.